and I was trying to figure out how to coin this, but I'm gonna call it a competitive set, right? We know people will see a set and they'll react and say like, "Oh, Lego's out of touch with its audience. They don't know what they're doing." But I would argue that Lego is more in touch with their audience than they've ever been, because it also feels like, yes, we're getting more expensive sets, but we're getting more expensive sets that I want as
Yeah.
well.
Well, not only what you want, right? But we're seeing a huge variety. And this is
Mm.
where, you and I talked about this before the show, right? Like the fact that we have a Beauty and the Beast castle in addition to a Disney castle, and they're like $300 sets, right? Like it's not for us, and that's okay. Like that is
Mm-hmm.
okay. It's okay to have a Lego set that's not for us, but it means it's for somebody else, right? And Lego wouldn't create that if they didn't feel like they had a legitimate market to sell a $300 Beauty and the Beast castle, like online. Like there is a market there for Lego to tap into.
Hello, bricks, chicks, and minifigures. You are listening to AFOLs Welcome, where we talk about all things Lego from the perspective of two adult collectors. We're your co-host. I'm Grinch.
And I'm West.
And today we are discussing if Lego has been releasing too many sets. But before we get to that, West, we are back.
We're
Did
back.
you have a good break? We're back.
We are back, and I did want to announce that both Grinch and myself are up on the Bricked app. That's Bricked spelled without an E. So please follow us. We'll have a link to that on our Instagram account, so you guys can follow us at Bricked, where you can see kind of us building stuff kind of throughout the week. And as promised on Instagram, I will kind of review my latest building experience, which was finishing the Eldorado Fortress, which was really exciting. So, Grinch, that's what I got done this week, or the last 2 weeks, really. And I got to say, that was a lot of fun. What a cool build. I really enjoyed building the rock structure that was a base plate that's now like Lego pieces. And I just really enjoyed how it all kind of came together. And this was one where I would build like a bag or two at a time. And so it was kind of nice to just really spread it out. That was kind of what I could tolerate throughout the week. But yeah, at the end of the day, I really like this one. And one of my friends came over last weekend and saw it and was like, dude, I need to get that. And I was like, there's maybe one or two left on the shelves, my friend. And we found him a Lego store that still had it. And he went in and he bought the second to last one. So
Nice.
Yeah, very exciting. How about you?
That set got so much hype when it was first announced, but I feel like it kind of died off rather quickly. Like it's like, so the 90th anniversary castle is still on shelves, but the Eldorado Fortress came out a year later and is already retired. So I think it's a bit of a shame.
Yeah, that's one where I think, it's we've talked about it many times on the podcast. It's hard to tell how many of them Lego created, right?
Yeah.
Like the Galaxy Explorer 2. I mean, I bought mine for 50% off at Walmart on a Black Friday sale. Like, what a killer.
Free same day delivery too. And I was like, how are they making money on this?
What a killer sale. But I mean, it seemed like everyone really liked it, but then it also kind of didn't sell well, ironically.
It just fell off a cliff all of a sudden. So
maybe there is a limit to how much, nostalgia, like buying power nostalgia brings you. Maybe that's the lesson to take away. But maybe the other lesson too is just, these kind of niche markets are super exciting, but at the same time too, their utility is limited for Lego. But who knows? I think it was fun. This is very clearly an example of where Lego has recreated a previously existing set and has done it better, in my opinion. Like, it's just a better set. There's no question about it. So not only do you tap into nostalgia, but you've given us a better version of it. And I kind of want that for everything. that Lego's done, to be
Yeah.
honest.
I think the set also really proves like it's good to move away from base plates, right?
Yeah.
Because the old one was built on a base plate and the new one's not, and it just looks so much better that way, right?
And the options
So,
it gives you to like unpack it and unfold it,
mhm.
to put it like on a bookshelf, for example, is just, there's so much more utility in the set. And there's so much you could do with that, because like that centerpiece that becomes the dock, you know,
Mhm.
you could fill that in with any number of pieces in your inventory and then add the dock to the side extremely easily if you wanted to, for example.
Right.
There's so much sort of customization you could do there to kind of expand it in a way, I think, that stays with the original theme and keeps it in line with that. So something I'm definitely interested in doing myself at some point. But yeah, I don't know. I would say the biggest miss is either the crane itself
Mhm.
or the boat. And I love the look of the crane on it. The only kind of downside I have is it just pivots and lowers, and you can't raise it
Yeah.
or lower it at all. And that feels like that wasn't necessarily supposed to be like that. And then from the perspective of the boat, it's I don't even mind the size of it. I think it's actually really great. We get a smaller sailing boat like that looks fairly complete. I was even trying to compare it to like, hey, what is this boat in real life? And I got somewhere between like a schooner and like something else, and I just kind of stopped because it was complicated. But I think it was close to like a Bahamian schooner or something like that. Like there were real three-masted boats or three-sailed boats like that,
Mhm.
single-masted three-sailed boats in real life, right? But like it just, the way that that bow, the front of the boat kind of is shaped. Like I said, I think I mentioned it on a previous episode. I could see where the designer was going with it, but because it stays flat, it just feels inconsistent. So I was kind of mocking some stuff up on Stud.io. That's a challenging bit to build, to be honest. So I don't blame the designer necessarily. Clearly, they had something in mind, but I just feel like the execution wise just wasn't quite there. But overall, this is like a solid, you know, nine out of 10, 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. You know, it's a great build.
Certified fresh.
Certified fresh. Yeah.
But do you know what's not certified fresh?
Ooh, what's that?
Is so I built the Thor Ragnarok set of Suitor, which was pretty good. That was fine. It was actually very good for like a buildable type figure.
Okay.
And then I built the End Game. I'm sorry, not End Game. The Age of Ultron
Ooh,
Hydra Fortress like winter battle scene.
yeah.
And there's that one, the same style, right? I don't know what we're battle scene style. I don't know. There's that one. There's the Civil War, and then there's the End Game one, right?
Hmm.
That they've come out with in the past year. And I don't know if I. Uh,
Grinch, it's a rare day you are disappointed by Lego. So I just want to
yeah,
bask
well,
in this for a little bit. I mean,
it's
I know
just
you've been a little critical of the cost, the price on some of these Marvel sets, but
yeah. Well, and I'm usually like a Lego Chad. Like I'm usually
an
defending
apologist.
prices. Yeah, but with these ones, here's my gripe. When you
Is Chad the
remove,
word the kids are using these days?
I don't know if I like to set
Okay.
trends. I don't like to follow them. If 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 you if you
Heard it here
remove
first, people.
the minifigures, it's just kind of a plate
Yeah.
with like a tiny little bunker and a little stand and some trees, right? And the Civil War battle, if you remove the minifigures, it's just like Ant-Man and like a little bit of a background. And the Endgame one, if you remove the minifigures, it's just literally the ground and some rubble and then some like sling ring holes. So
Yeah.
like I haven't figured out a way to display because I display my minifigures separately. So what I might do is just keep extra minifigures on because I only like display one of each minifigure,
Hmm.
obviously. And then I might just keep the extra ones on the set because without the minifigures, the sets are dead. There's no life to the set. I
I
mean, they
mean,
just are like Eldorado Fortress, for example. You could look at it and be like, wow, this is a beautiful set. Like, this is super cool. And you could take the minifigures off and you'd still be like, wow, this is a super cool set. I think, with these, it's
mhm,
like you take the minifigures off and it's like half the bulk, half the set is just gone, right?
yeah.
They're really using the minifigures in this case to like add a lot of action, add a lot of the display appeal to the set, and once they're gone, it's gone in my mind.
No, that's an interesting point, and I don't blame you at all. And I could see that. I mean, I feel like this is maybe where the rules that you set for yourself for collection maybe are starting to get stretched a little bit or stressed, right? Because like I think someone who would collect minifigures would just say like, well, I just parted it out or I sold it, the
Mm-hmm.
base. But I know you like to keep both the base and the minifigures, but you do like to share the minifigures separately. So maybe this is a case of you need to get. Well, here's what you could do: is you could take any duplicate versions of those minifigures that are not unique to that set. So like another Iron Man, another Black
Yeah,
Widow, and you could just put them in there as stand-in figures, right? And that way
that's what
you
I
have
was thinking.
minifigures doing something, and you're still
Right.
sort of honoring the intent of separating your minifigures for the collection, but then your display also doesn't lose some of its.
Well,
Um,
and infamously, they pretty much re-released all these minifigures in the other battle sets, which was a gripe because it's supposed to be this minifigure
well, and it's
display piece,
expensive
but
too.
the minifigures
You
aren't
can't
actually
give us,
accurate to the scene at that point.
yeah.
So there
Well,
there are duplicates. So
Age of
that's
Ultron
probably what
was
I'll
a
do.
pretty
But
forgettable
also,
movie.
rewatch it, bro. It
Ugh,
it's aged well, is all I'll say. In my
has it?
opinion, it's aged well.
Okay.
Yeah. I think, anyways, we don't need to talk about Marvel movies, but that's what I built. And then, as you know, I also got the Chief minifigure from
Yeah.
Rock Raiders. I found a heck of a deal on Craigslist. So, um, as people know on the show, if you've listened to this podcast before, Chief is like $400 to $500, and I found it on Craigslist for 150. And he's not in perfect pristine condition, but he is near mint. So that's really cool. So
And in like your local area too, which is kind
yeah,
of
I just
cool.
I just randomly went onto Craigslist one night, which I will maybe do once a month, but I just happened to check.
You got to be careful with randomly going onto Craigslist. You never know what you're going to find.
I think that's a good transition to exciting Lego news.
Well, if I may, one of the
Yes.
things I love about that battle scene is
The
some of the foreground
Ultron
of it.
one.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, is the scene that is taking place. They use that new fern piece for trees really well. They have probably, in my opinion, one of the coolest Lego Jeeps ever created,
Mm-hmm. The
or
Jeep's good.
like looking, Jeep-esque thing, right? And that could be recolored into a lot of different versions. And I think mock builders or anyone have with a city could have a lot of fun with that, right? You could do it in yellow and red and turn it into like a rescue vehicle for the beach. You could do it in green or blue and make it a police or like a park ranger or something. Like there's so much you could do there, right? I think it's a really great build and it's relatively simple and there's not a lot of exclusive pieces in it from what I recall,
No.
which is I think a staple to some of those Marvel, specifically, those Marvel movies. Some of those sets and some of the vehicles in them are fantastic. So it is a real shame that not only is it extremely overpriced, because I probably would have picked one of these up just to get the extras in it. But and then to hear that the experience that in your opinion is kind of lackluster just all around is a bit of a bummer. So
The Age of Ultron one is clearly as good as it gets for these three, right? I don't know if they're going
yeah,
to come out with any other ones in the future, but
I would concur. Of the
for
three,
this
that's definitely the
trio,
best. Yeah.
it goes downhill from here. And just seeing what I was seeing from the Ultron one, build experience is not bad, but there's it's going to be a very easy decision when I run out of space to pull that that set. So I guess
Well,
I guess that's good.
yeah. But speaking of which, as you tried to graciously get us to move along, and then I
Exciting Lego
took
news.
us off the rails. Let's do it.
Exciting Lego news. Choo choo. We are back on the rails to some exciting Lego news. West,
All
take
right.
us away.
Well, so over the last 2 weeks, there's been some really kind of interesting rumors kind of floating around in the ether. I'm very excited personally to talk about those when
Aether.
we get those officially released, right? But the news for this week, there was a new Vietnam factory that is opening up, and it includes an exclusive commemorative set for the grand opening, which is exciting. I think Lego has learned their lesson from COVID and is trying to open up factories all over the world, to include one close by to where I live, which is exciting to see and makes sense, right? We've talked about that in the past. Marvel busts. We got an Iron Man Mark IV and Iron Spider officially revealed. There is a free build event at Barnes & Noble's on May 2nd through the 4th. Lego Masters Academy experience at the Lego House has been announced. And the May the 4th live stream has been, or a May the 4th live stream has been announced for April 15th. So Grinch, sorry, I forgot my etiquette to read the news first and then start getting into things. But I talked about the factory. Any other kind of details on the factory you want to talk about?
The exclusive gifts looks cool, but it's probably going to go for a couple $1,000, so it's all good. It's
I'm
all
sure
good.
it'll be available on the secondary market. That seems to be how any of these exclusives work.
The thing is, though, is it just, I don't know how many people go to or went to the grand opening event, but it'll be interesting.
Yeah. Anyways,
interesting.
What else was stuck with you this week?
What do you think about the Lego Masters Academy?
Grinch, why don't you tell the listeners more about that?
So it's a experience at the Lego house, and it's essentially it looks very similar to the US version of Lego Masters, like their studio setup for the competition, and you can go and partake in like 4 competition challenges and kind of get a feel of what it's like to actually compete on Lego Masters. So it's a Lego house experience that you can do, and I think it's a really interesting. I think it's a really interesting way to kind of get some hands-on experience at what essentially is a museum, right?
Yeah.
Because you can go, if you're not a kid, they have little like areas where you can build throughout, but like if you're not a little kid, you're probably not going to go and be like, oh my gosh, look what I built. This is so cool. Like I built this using 2x4 bricks. Like, oh my goodness. So like this definitely, in my opinion, adds appeal for like an AFOL to go, right, and experience this or do some of these challenges. So I didn't see if there was a cost associated with it, or if you need certain people, or if they only do it at certain times. But sorry, what were you saying?
No, I was going to say it's interesting because this is something that feels like when you described it for the listeners, of course.
Only for the listeners, right?
Only for the listeners. It sounded kind of like a prep academy for Lego Masters, almost like a prep school. But clearly, I mean, I think after thinking about it, I'm like, well, it's definitely not that, right? But like in jest, right? Like, could you imagine going and they're like, okay, we're doing 4 12-hour build rounds. Like, I don't know where you're staying tonight, but
well, I have
like,
so many more questions, right?
Denmark just
like, do you have to get a ticket ahead of time? Do you have to bring competitors with you? And are they just going to be like, okay, guys, here's 5 bricks, build something in 5 minutes. And for our next challenge, we're going to do the 6 brick challenge. But guess what? You'll have 6 minutes. Because like if it was four Lego Master like competitions in a row, it would be what, like at least 8 hours of competition.
Yeah.
Like,
and maybe that is exactly what it is. It's just done like we do this, once or twice a month, for example, and you have to sign up ahead of time, and you get, maybe that's exactly what this type of thing is at the end of the day. Or maybe it's just kind of their own, like, hey, you're visiting the Lego house today. Here's what it looks like in the Lego Master Studio. Try out your hand. Here's 30 minutes to kind of free build something. But, I kind of envision it like just the chaos that would ensue of like, all the piece pit of just like Lego bricks everywhere. And could you imagine being the poor soul who has to like clean that up every night?
Jordy from Lego Masters Australia, if you know, you know. There is actually a ton. So for anybody who's listening is like, I want more information on this. There is a ton of information on the Lego website, but there's not a ton of logistic information.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a actual like 3-page announcement on Lego's news website,
Nice.
which is cool. But and it actually has, so there's level 1, which is family fun for families and casual builder. Level 2, foundation skills for structural learners. Level 3, advanced building for confident builder. And then level 4, master level for aspiring Lego masters.
Interesting.
But those, I believe, the way I'm reading it, are the different levels, but you still can, I'm not sure if you just sign up for one level or if you do all, you can do 4 builds within each level or something like that.
Yeah.
So there is more info to be announced for sure. It opens September 17th of this year.
And if it was a program where like you got to go in and build something, and then you had a Lego master builder come and actually like give you tips and pointers, almost like a free build workshop or something like that, like I think that would be really cool. So I makes me a little disappointed that it's located in Billund, Denmark, and it's not the easiest for me to get to. I can't just like hop in my car and head to Billund this weekend for a Lego Masters Academy. So
you could.
Well, that's true. I wouldn't get very far, but
you could.
I could attempt.
Also, probably get divorced.
Well,
and your little West would probably not like you very much anymore. But you could, just to clarify.
I don't know how I could.
We don't hold back inspiration on this podcast, West.
Well, the May the 4th live stream was announced for April 15th, which is funny.
I thought it was on May the 4th.
Right. The May the 4th live stream is going to be on April 15th. There's definitely some irony there, right?
Yes.
What could that be, Grinch?
I'll be slaving over it all week.
Don't you mean Starship?
Starshipping, sorry. The name is different now. What do you think of traditionally everything gets leaked before these live streams, so they're kind of all like a little bit of, just a bunch of like hoopla. But Lego I saw they have this partnership too. I didn't include it on our notes because it's kind of random, with this like white hat leak company.
Interesting.
Which is like people are like, they're trying to crack down, and they did it with Pokemon as like a test run. And so I think they're trying to roll it out to be bigger, to just like, so I guess it's people will go around to like all their affiliated social media people, be like, okay, this is where this leak originated. I don't know. It was pretty vague.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, to their credit, the Pokemon one caught us all by surprise. So well done. I don't know how successful this will be in the long run. Specifically talking about the May the 4th live stream. You and I talked about it before the show, of whether we were going to talk about what was specifically being streamed, and both agreed that at the end of the day, that didn't quite meet the values that we wanted to, or our ethical requirements that we have set forward for the podcast and the show. Just as a reminder for the listeners, once it's officially revealed, we will talk about it, but that's what we're waiting on. But we both know what it is, and we've known what it is for a while, and it's April the 10th, and there are some very good images of what it is.
And you will be listening to this on April 14th. So
So, I mean, it's very clear what's going on here. But to be honest too, I've noticed on like the Reddit channel that's associated with
Mm-hmm.
this stuff, we're seeing a lot more sources from Red Note, right? That is the Chinese version of
Yeah.
Instagram or TikTok. That is like the Chinese TikTok. So,
We're also
uh,
seeing more descriptions too,
yeah. So
right?
I don't
Less images and
right,
yeah.
just more like, hey, this is kind of the
Here's a
general thought
drawing.
process. Yeah. Which sometimes can be good and sometimes bad, right? The Hogwarts Express, UCS Hogwarts Express description, I think led a lot of people astray, which is kind of our rationale for why we don't want to talk about leaks.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, no, there's images. So Red Note's going to be a lot harder to crack down on, though. Is I guess what I'm getting at, especially when it comes to you know um, a environment like that where those type of things are, I think, a lot more. It's not as frowned upon. So,
Yeah.
anyways, yeah, interesting
Well, I
news.
think that wraps up the news. We took a 2 week break. There was a lot of news as usual, but no like ginormous major announcements. Right? We got. I think the last biggest one would be the Shire. So let's go ahead and move over to today's topic. Today's topic, West. Today we are talking all about if Lego is releasing too many sets. And if you're a fan of the show, if you've listened to the show before, you know that we like to bring data into this conversation. But before we get to that data, let's just talk about how we feel, right? Let's get the subjective part up front before we get a little bit more objective. And West, quick answer here. Do you feel like Lego's coming out with too many sets?
Grinch, it's a complicated question because on one hand is like an AFOL, more Lego would seemingly be a good thing, right?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, as an AFOL, more Lego is starting to lead to, I think, some wallet fatigue for a lot of us.
Mm-hmm.
And so it does feel like at the moment we've seen more Lego than we've ever seen before. And that's a very big generalization. And I think our data might have something to say on that. But it feels like there's just so much coming at us. And it's varied, right? So many new themes that were originally oriented towards children now have sort of a sub adult line. We have an
Yeah.
entire line devoted just to adult oriented sets called the Icons line. But then there's subshoots of the Icon line. And then there's the Ideas line, which inevitably are also more or less adult oriented sets
Right.
because adults are the ones who pick them. And then you've got like the botanical series now and the architecture series, and you've got all of these different things that are all of the master builder, the UCS, right? Like there's all of these things within these lines that are kind of geared towards the adult. And so, yes, it does feel like there are, I wouldn't say it does feel like there's a lot, right?
Yeah.
And so I think we'll kind of unpack that as the night goes on and as we kind of continue to talk about it. But at first glance, yeah, it does. There's a little bit of like decision fatigue too, or kind of decision paralysis here, because there's just so much to pick from.
As we were going over the show notes prior, you mentioned something to me and you were like, well, back when we were little, our mom would pick out the Throwbot sets that were $6, right? Like we wouldn't buy those big sets. And I think with the AFOL journey, there is inherently when you were a kid and probably quote unquote, buying Lego prior to coming out of your dark ages and being an adult, it was you weren't buying, right? You're like you were crying because you didn't get the $100 set and your parents were buying you the $10 set, right? And then now that you're an AFOL spending your own money and you actually feel that money leave your hand or the bank account, right? It's a lot of a different purchasing experience. It's a very nice experience because you're buying all these awesome sets, right? Famously, you're buying all the sets that you couldn't get as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also you're also the one buying it, right? So I think there's going to be a little bit of experience bias there. no matter what, right?
I mean, it's kind of like going to the grocery store hungry. It feels like a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And it's like you buy the stuff that's just going to fill you up quick, and then you leave and you start snacking on something, and you're like, man, now I'm full, or now I feel gross, or like,
Yeah, but I had to buy all these vegetables because they were healthy. But then I just ate a bag of potato chips.
but the problem, right? And we've been hearing about this from AFOLs. We talked with Greg about it. We've talked with, my friends who came over last weekend kind of recently got back into Lego collecting too. And they have a smaller Lego collection, but a very,
Robust.
yeah, I mean, they have the Rivendell and Barad-dûr, and they were mentioning, both of them were like, we don't know where we're going to put this stuff. Like now building or acquiring some sort of storage or shelving system is something that we are seriously thinking about. And it's this kind of like the problem that you didn't think was a problem as like an AFOL. It's like, man, where do I put all this now that I've got so much stuff? And yeah, it does take a while for that to sink in, but once it does, man, I think you and I have both experienced that, and has shaped how we've approached the hobby. And so, but it doesn't mean that like, leaving, like we've mentioned it, right? We're like, I'm going to enjoy this set from a distance. Doesn't mean that that sucks, right? Like I don't always like doing that. Sometimes like the Eldorado Fortress, I enjoyed it for a distance long enough. And then I was like, nah, I need to get that. But
I'm going to regret this one.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes there's other ones where I'm like, I'm not as sad about that. So
yeah,
I don't know. That's kind of my feelings on that. But
so let's move away from the feelings and let's talk some data here. So when we went through the Lego fiscal results, they had said, oh, they had this many products on the shelf, and it was a different. We chatted about it for a little bit because it was a different number than what we had seen, right? And we weren't sure where that number came from. So I did a little bit of cleanup. My sources are going to is Brickset, and what I did is, for example, here, Brick Economy says that in 2024 there were 829 sets released, but then when you clicked on it, it actually only listed 703 sets. Brickset, however, showed that there were 938 sets. In that Lego report, I believe it was like 480 sets. So we were just a little bit confused about this number. So what I did is actually downloaded every single year's data from Brickset, and I went through and I only included sets that had a retail price. So this removed magazine gift with purchases, store gift with purchases, gift with purchase exclusive sets, right? Not available at retail. For example, the Vietnam factory set we talked about during the news, and employee gift set, whatever. It does keep CMFs as individual sets, but it removes like a complete box because you can't buy the complete box at retail, for example. I did randomly spot check this methodology. I did 20 spot checks, a few for each year. And for perfect example here, I removed set 11926, which was the wooden minifigure accessories from the 2019 wooden minifigure, which you could only get that packet of accessories if you bought the wooden minifigure set, which was already being counted. So for whatever reason, the little packet of accessories that came with had a set number. So not available at retail though. So you still got it if you got the wooden minifigure set. So stuff like that has been removed. The data from pre-2000 is really unreliable. There was a lot of missing information there. So when I did this cleanup, it worked really, really well. And to make sure I wasn't introducing another bias and correctly cleaning up the data, I also checked this without doing the cleanup, and we still got a very similar trend, but this gives a more realistic number of the actual sets available at retail, right? So, West, I've got the chart in front of you. I have it in front of me. We will post it to our Instagram. We'll make sure it's up there when the episode is live so that you can, if you want to look at it yourself and follow along, you absolutely can. We'll be referring to the first chart for right now, referring to the number of retail Lego sets released each year. And West, what do your fine data eyes see?
Well, this is where, and I think you mentioned it in the end of the year wrap up, I believe, where you'd kind of made a point of like data can, or really you mentioned this on the end of year results for Lego, and you said data can kind of tell whatever story you want it to, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to sit here and say, dear listener, dear viewer, I was right. We are getting more Lego sets every year. The the skew line is skewing up, not
It is.
not down. But for anyone who is actually looking at the chart, right, and Grinch is laughing because I kind of went a little off playbook there, but
Look,
and
look, look. I had a statistics professor, and he said data never lies, but you can lie with data. So Wes is telling
how
a lie.
profound, how profound. But I'm not lying with the data. It is
Well,
skewing up.
if you only look at 2021 and beyond, it's actually gone down.
Well, there you go. No, if you look at it from 2000 to 2024, what we see is, a very kind of level line from 2000 to 2005, which makes sense. That was the period of time where Lego was having financial troubles, right? And then you start to see it pick up. And that kind
Mm-hmm.
of tracks too, as Lego's kind of getting their feet underneath them. They've got a little more cash flow. They're able to invest in more. And we see a steady growth up until about the mid 2010s. And then it starts to kind of taper off. And then we see some growth at the end of the 2010s and the early 2020s. And then it kind of tapers again. But really from 2014 to 2024, it's been fairly consistent. We mentioned it. It's within 60, around
It's a
60
10%
sets.
increase
Yeah,
from 2014 to 2024.
right. But by and large, fairly flat, right?
Right.
We saw the largest increase in between 2008 ish. Really, I mean, 2005, right, was that dip to about 2014 was when Lego really took off. Some of the biggest changes, it in fact doubled the amount of sets year over year, and more so, right? We had 222 sets in 2005, and in 2015, our numbers are showing 551. So more than
Which,
doubles.
what was released in 2014, West?
Oh,
The Lego movie.
yeah, yeah,
And I think the Lego movie itself had like 60 sets or something
it did.
ridiculous.
It had a crazy number of sets.
Yeah.
So, and waves, if I recall, it not only had just one wave, but had a second wave of sets. So, yeah, so we see, and then from there, right, we get kind of a peak 2022. We had 631 sets, and then this last year, 611. So, kind of staying consistent around that like 600, 580 mark. It would be kind of that
Mm-hmm.
average from 2014 probably to 2024 if you had to average all that up. So, fairly consistent, and kind of bouncing around that range, but nothing aggressive. So if you were to read this chart, it would tell us that, like, depending on your time frame and what time span you're looking at, like there really isn't any more sets now than there were over the last decade. Really, it's been pretty consistent.
Right. I mean, 10% increase. So mathematically speaking, yes, there are a few more sets. Realistically speaking, if you walked down the Lego aisle, you would not notice.
Right.
10 more sets, right?
Yeah, I mean,
10% more.
You add an extra CMF wave in 1 year, that's another 12 sets, right, that you're adding. So it's not.
Or you go from having 16 CMFs 3 times a year to 12 CMFs 3 times a year, right? Because they reduced, was that 2019? They reduced the number of CMFs that came in each wave, in each series.
They did, but did they also kind of increase some of the CMFs, right? So
they haven't done that since, because the last one was Harry Potter. The first one, which was 2018, they did like 22.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, but maybe there's a little bit more to this, right? Maybe if that's 12 minifigures less a year, that means there's 12 sets more a year, right? Like that space is being taken up by sets, right?
Right. So, I mean, there's who knows, what this breakdown could look like. It's really not super important. What we know is that the number of Lego sets each year is fairly consistent. And so why are we still feeling this way?
And just to reiterate a quick point, if you remove all of the gear and or keep all the gears, accessories, and everything non-retail, it's a very similar trend.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to overcorrect the data and like fabricate something with it. So if anybody's sitting there thinking, well, what would it look like without it? Very similar, right?
Yeah.
In fact, pretty much identical. It's the peak is 2022 still. Big bump at the early 10s. So yeah, objectively, we're not necessarily getting more sets. So Wes, why do you think it feels that way?
I mean, that's tough. And you and I have talked about this a little bit more recently and have talked about just the release of more IP-based sets. We've talked about kind of the expansion of adult-oriented sets. We've talked about, I think over the Christmas episode when we were kind of doing our Christmas list of like, here's our recommendations, we talked about how the $100 and up range felt very expansive, whereas like some of the smaller ranges didn't necessarily have like a ton of stuff in it. We've talked about this as we've reviewed old themes, and we're like, man, like this Throwbot was $6 back in the day. Like that's insane. And so just, it's interesting to see that play out. But I'm sure there is a reason for this. And so Grinch, what did you find in your data?
Well, like you talked, we had a hypothesis that maybe it's not the number of sets that are making us feel fatigued. It's the price of the set, and it's the number of dollars we have to spend on those sets because there's a lot more big sets. So we did very similar exercise, but just looking at the sets with a 199.99 price tag and up. I felt like that $200 point was a really good threshold. To kind of, because I really wanted to look at the outliers of that, right? I felt like 300 might be too high, but $200 felt like just a really good sweet spot, 100 being too low. And West, you've got the next chart in front of you. This chart tells a little bit of a different story, doesn't it?
So this one where the other one started to taper off, this one is consistently, and if not even exponentially almost getting, it's not a linear increase here. It is definitely increasing at an exponential rate. And so, year over year, the number of sets that are at that $200 and up range is increasing significantly. And just to look at it over the first year in 2001, we had 2 sets, it looks like, that were over that $100 or $200 mark. With a few years where we only had 1 set being released, right? All the way up to 2024.
By the way, this goes back to 2000.
Yeah, looking closer
and there's
to
no 2000 on this list, so that's a 0.
We're looking at over 33 sets that were $200 or more, right? And I think that is an important distinction, right? Because that $200 price range does feel like that demarcation line in between, kind of what we would consider an adult oriented set versus not. And it doesn't mean there aren't adult oriented sets. Certainly there are 18 plus sets below that $200 price point. But I would be interested I'm sure we could find something. But if we could, you're not finding a Duplo set at $200 or more, right? That's the entire Duplo wave. But, but we aren't seeing like friend sets above that price range. We're not seeing,
or very rarely we do, right? Because wasn't Modern Mansion $219 or was it $180?
That feels very expensive for that set. So I'd be curious if anyone could, off the top of their nugget, just throw out a set that was $200 or more that was not an adult oriented set.
Andrea's Modern Mansion was $199.99. So it would be on this list.
There you go. So, okay. So there are a few that are kind of borderline, right? But like,
Hmm.
I think that that is a very significant price point which isn't to say that like if someone got this, a $200 set given to them or anything, like we're not here to pass judgment. We're not here to like, throw any sort of shade. Like that's a wonderful gift for somebody. I think that's a great, great gift. Right.
What
But
did I
like
get you for a wedding gift?
you got me the UCS Millennium Falcon for a wedding gift. So
That was sweet.
it was a very nice gift.
So you hated it, is what you're saying?
Did you keep the receipt?
You said you felt awkward. Yeah, I'll just take it back to the Lego store. Built. I put it in bags for you though.
No, but it's an important line, I think, to say that like I think if we're getting above that $200 line, that we really are talking about collector oriented sets, adult oriented
Mhm.
sets. Even Andrea's Mansion, I would argue, is of all the friend sets, a more adult oriented friend set than anything else that we've seen in that line. So I think there is some, argument to be made there that this is the right price point to kind of be considered versus something like you said, like sub $200, right? So doesn't mean we don't get like play scale stuff at this level, right? But it also, this is kind of serious Lego buying territory
Yeah.
of, all of your modulars for the most part have been around $200, if not higher. There's been a few that are lower, but generally speaking, that's the threshold for some of those sets. So,
Well,
and
and
yes, sorry, go ahead.
one thing too. So just to reiterate the chart really quick, from 2014 to 2024, in the first chart, it was a 10% increase.
Mm-hmm.
This is triple. This is 300% increase.
It's not even triple, right? I mean, we're showing in 2014 6.
Well, I was kind of taking an average of that
Sure.
time
But
period.
that's
Yeah.
5 times the number of
Yes.
sets.
Yes.
Over
From
5
2014
times.
specifically to 2024, yes, it is
Yeah,
gone from 6 to
33.
5.2 or whatever times. Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
significant increase.
It really is, and it'll be interesting to see where the trend continues. I didn't put 2025 data because
Well,
like
it's incomplete.
it's only April, right? But it would be interesting to see like where 2025 was stacking up. But when you look at how Lego releases stuff, they kind of release more stuff towards the beginning of the year than the back of the year. So who knows? But I digress. The other thing, and I had tried to look for it in the data and I couldn't quite get it. But Wes, we talked about a set just now, the Millennium Falcon. Obviously on this list, that set came out in 2015? It's still on the market today.
Mm-hmm.
The more expensive sets tend to sit on the market a lot longer as well.
Yeah.
And so Brickset does give you release date and retirement date, but when you pull the data, it doesn't pull it well or consistently. So I didn't have all that information, but I would gander that we're seeing a lot more of these expensive sets sit on the market for longer as well.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do go to a lego.com and you go to $100+ of sets, the $100 sets that came out 2 years ago,
right?
Exactly.
The ones from 2023, the ones from 2022, potentially the one from 2015, in addition to the 33 that you're seeing this year.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas the $50 sets, the $100 sets, those are usually kind of in and out, right? A lot of the Marvel stuff, they'll pull, but you can still go and get the Daily Bugle.
Right.
But I can't get Guardians 3. I can't get the Marvels set. I can't get Thor 4 sets, but I can still get Daily Bugle.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a really great point. And so either, I mean, on one hand, I would say it's kind of a nice thing, right? Because Lego's saying like, hey, adult collectors, like we get it. You guys are, buying these sets up. There's a lot of them. We'll keep these on the shelf.
If you're on a budget,
yeah,
it's more reasonable, right?
But on the other hand, like we mentioned, now instead of 33 sets that you're seeing that you want, maybe you're staring at like 100 of them, and you're like, how can I afford $100, $200 sets? It's a lot of money, it turns out. So
yes. The yes, it is. It's 5.2 times the number of sets as well. So yes, the data here is a lot more supportive, right? Is it
Yeah.
and again, I think some of this is and I think what we're trying to do on the show, like when we had our conversation about is Lego getting more expensive, it's about asking the right questions, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about asking a question. Oh my God, Lego's coming out with way too many sets. Lego is just coming out with more expensive sets, like we've said, but also Lego is doing. And I was trying to figure out how to coin this, but I'm gonna call it a competitive set, right? We know people will see a set and they'll react and say like, "Oh, Lego's out of touch with its audience. They don't know what they're doing." But I would argue that Lego is more in touch with their audience than they've ever been because it also feels like, yes, we're getting more expensive sets, but we're getting more expensive sets that I want as
Yeah.
well.
Well, not only what you want, right, but we're seeing a huge variety. And this is
Mm-hmm.
where, you and I talked about this before the show, right? Like the fact that we have a Beauty and the Beast castle in addition to a Disney castle, and they're like $300 sets, right? Like it's not for us, and that's okay. Like that is
Mm-hmm.
okay. It's okay to have a Lego set that's not for us, but it means it's for somebody else, right? And Lego wouldn't create that if they didn't feel like they had a legitimate market to sell a $300 Beauty and the Beast castle, like online. Like there is a market there for Lego to tap into.
Right.
And I think that's evident to me by just seeing how many of my kind of adult peers have gotten back into Lego with things like the botanical line
Mm-hmm.
and some of the other art sets. I have some family, my in-laws have been huge collectors of the botanical series, and then they love anything bird related that Lego creates. And now my brother-in-law has been buying a lot of the F1 stuff, and he has a huge Star Wars helmet collection. And I there's that gateway drug for kind of people coming out of their dark ages for Lego, right? And that's the Lego varying how much stuff that they're creating and creating more variation in that is, I think, what is ultimately contributing to that as well. Where and maybe is what's contributing to some of that decision paralysis on our end, because we
Mm-hmm.
see all of that that's available. And when we were kids and we were just collecting Star Wars, or we were just collecting one theme, it was a lot easier to kind of buy into that. But now that there's so many different themes that have so many different cool things, that we're like, wow, I didn't know I wanted a Lego bonsai tree, but now I do.
Never knew I
It's
wanted
just
that.
right. It's
Now
like
I have 7.
that scene from Napoleon Dynamite. You're just like, I want that.
God, great movie.
Oh, yes, fantastic movie. But
Bet you don't have one of these. I want that.
if you buy the 32 piece set, oh dear.
Awesome.
Hashtag gift with purchases.
Yes. No, but you're right. I mean, Lego's strategy is very clearly let's go wide,
Yeah.
right? And I think the data is showing that because and I don't have number of themes. I could pull it if I've got all the data now, but the number of themes has probably increased too to support that, because back in the day when a new movie would come out, like we got like 6 Lone Ranger sets.
Mhm.
Actually, I think it was like 8 if you count polybags. Like it was a lot. We have Dune Ornithopter Atreides.
Yeah. A one-off.
That's it.
Yeah.
We have the Stranger Things set, the one-off, right? We've got Lion Knight Castle over here. We've got McAllister Home Alone. Right? I know that was an idea set, so it's not like they were trying to do a full weight. But my point is Fortnite sets. We got Fortnite sets. We got 4. Right there's a lot. It seems to be a lot more focused
waves, but
and strategic and intent with the sets, right?
Intent, but also strategic, but also almost like surgical and tactical in the precision of them too.
Right.
Like you're not getting other goofy sets from Dune. They're just like, we know you want the ornithopter. Here's the ornithopter, but like that's it. That's all you're gonna get. Be happy.
And those like sci-fi purists that are out there that aren't like too big into Star Wars but really big into Dune, they're
Mm-hmm.
now buying Lego,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or they might be looking forward to buying a set later this year. We don't know yet until it's officially announced. But
But as long as we live long and prosper, we might find out.
there we go.
So,
Perfect. I was trying to think of the tie-in.
oh dear.
So yeah,
Anyways,
that's what I'm trying to coin here. Is like it's the sets are if you look at it as a competition, right? Like Lego comes out with 20 large sets every year. I feel like 10 years ago I might have just wanted 5, but now it's more competitive. Those sets are pulling more of my attention each, and all of a sudden I'm like, well, maybe I want 10 of those 20 sets, right? Or
mm-hmm.
maybe I want 15. And it definitely did feel like 10 years ago it was more realistic to like get every single one, right? Like you could get the Tower Bridge even if you weren't like obsessed with it, right? You
Mm-hmm.
could get those random kind of one-off adult sets where it was just, hey, it was like this year's adult set. But now you certainly, I mean, it's 5.5 times, right?
There's a lot of options for adult collectors.
So I think we tackled the question using data. We started subjective, we went objective, and then we kind of went back to the kind of subjective part about the conversation with the data support. Wes, did you have any final thoughts?
One of the things that stuck with me that you mentioned, right, was that
Mm-hmm.
we are not necessarily seeing what is on the shelf today. And that applies too to the regular series of Lego sets. So when you said those numbers of like anywhere from like 500 to 600 or so Lego sets, right? You mentioned that like, we could be seeing some of those still on the shelves today, but by and large, like you mentioned, it's really the adult ones that we see with longer shelf longevity than with a higher degree of shelf longevity than like the city waves, for example. So I think there's some nuance to that discussion too. And if we compared those $200 plus sets for the time, like you said, at the time they sat on the shelves, I would imagine we see them a lot longer than we would for, like your standard city wave, for example, where, we got a fire department this year and we're going to get a fire department in 2 years. Right. And
Right.
maybe they're on the shelf together for a few weeks, but generally they don't overlap too much.
Well, this is not scientific at all, but I just went to lego.com and I looked at all the products on the website by searching Lego. So it's got a couple out of stock items that might have just retired. It's showing me 1,600 products.
Yeah. So, I mean,
So
still a
1,600.
large
go buy
amount
them
of
all.
Lego sets
Add
for
to
you to
cart.
pick from. So, or add to cart. Yeah. But
What's this Visa? There's somebody who's trying to use your credit card on lego.com.
I was speaking to a coworker the other day and we had talked about the Throwbots. I was telling him about the Throwbots episode we had done and kind of how we had mentioned how kind of weird those series of years were when we got Throwbots and then we got Robo Riders and then Bionicle in quick succession. And it felt like Lego was just sort of throwing spaghetti at the wall. But even to the point I think you made when we talked about that, just to kind of recap the listeners briefly, was that, that had to have been a market strategy for them to release them in quick succession like that. So it wasn't like they were trying to see if the theme stuck and then they were going to continue it. If Throwbots came out one year and Robo Riders did the next year, then like Throwbots was only ever going to be a 1-year theme and Robo Riders was always going to be kind of up next, right? And so to that discussion, right, now these days we're seeing a lot more sets that are based on IP. Like you mentioned with the Dune Ornithopter, we're seeing smaller and more specific waves of sets coming out that are not getting repeats. To some extent, Lego is I think really optimizing its structure because and we mentioned this when we did the Rock Raiders episode, looking back at like the concept art that they created, the lore they developed in order to release a one and done series was fairly significant. That's a huge expense. Now all that work gets to be done by Lego by somebody else, and Lego then just gets to recreate it in Lego form, and you're not having to pay into that system as much. And on one hand, building a set like the Eldorado Fortress makes me nostalgic for old Lego, where you had some of these really creative and interesting themes that were generalized and didn't have a lot to do with, a specific movie. But I remember the first time we got Star Wars. I remember the first time we got Harry Potter and Indiana Jones, and how exciting that was too, to get IP based Lego sets. So I think, to kind of sum all of this up, right? Like, Lego is, to your point, they're getting better at figuring out what people want. They're kind of doing maybe not even figuring out what people want, but they're kind of tapping into kind of the cultural moment to optimize not only what they are offering to the consumer, but also trying to reach out to as many people as possible. So clearly, I think, if there's any other takeaway from the ones we've already provided on this episode, I think it's fairly easy to say here that they know what they're doing to some extent. And if they're going to do something, it's probably done for a good reason, right? Lego doesn't make a ton of mistakes like this anymore, or it's pretty rare to see that these days. So
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think? Is that maybe too complimentary to Lego, too apologist? You're the apologist early in the episode, and now I'm the apologist at the
Sounds
end,
like we got a Lego Chad on our hands.
Oh dear. Well,
dude, we should change our name to like the Lego Chad podcast.
The Chad Pod, Lego Chad Pod.
Yeah. No, I think you summarized it well. So I don't have anything to add. I will leave it there. West, are you ready to move over to some brick mail?
Let's do it.
Brick mail. All right. So for brick mail, we took 2 weeks off. We have a lot of brick mail. So sorry if we didn't feature yours on our show this week. We tried to feature some people who had maybe first time writing in, or that we haven't heard from. So Wes, do you want to take away the first one?
Yeah. So our first one is from someone who's written it before, Control Alt Tahu. And they wrote, "Hi, Grinch and West. Playing a bit of catch up on my podcast. I'm a few weeks behind, but the topic of customization came up at the end of the financial results episode. I think with the right guest, you could get a phenomenal episode out of the topic, because there's a whole corner of the fan community doing something with it that's really a different angle from a focus on sets and or collecting them. For myself, I have at most flirted with customizing things. I don't have a deft enough hand to paint things, and I don't want to damage parts if I can, and don't want to waste them if I do. But I've spray painted a few Bionicle masks in my youths, printed some stickers to change the factions of some minifigures, and used a Sharpie to fix old castle swords where the chrome paint was peeling. Anything beyond that, very moderate level of customizing is beyond me. Since I'm not primarily a set collector completionist, and since I'm really not interested in the resale value of my Lego, my approach to customs others have made is basically, is that cool? And do I want it? And I admit that I don't normally want it if it's not real Lego, but there are exceptions. Make of it what you will, but I generally like custom printed genuine Lego parts, dislike custom molded minifigure wear like helmets or armor, and have had a soft spot for customer molded minifigure weapons. Outside of anything to do with minifigures, I generally don't care for custom parts at all, with the exception of Bionicle masks filling some of those canon gaps, which I'd love to find out what those canon gaps are, but in Bionicle. Which isn't a question I'm just genuinely interested in. Bionicle canon is something I have, maybe we need to do a Bionicle episode, Grinch. But sorry, Let me get back to the last little bit here. Playing a bit of catch up, Pokemon wasn't really part of my childhood. I knew of it, but didn't get into it. But my 6-year-old is really psyched for 2026 because of it. So I'm sure I'll get the experience playing of it close up.
All I'll say is go watch Pokemon the movie 2000. I think it used to be on YouTube for free. Probably still, you could probably just watch it on YouTube, to be honest. It is actually, I own it. Watch it. I own it. But I haven't watched, no. I've watched, I actually rewatch that every once in a while. It's actually really good. And West, you should as well.
That's because that was the one with Lugia, wasn't it?
Yeah, we saw
Yeah.
that in theaters, and we got the like Ancient Mew promo.
Yeah. Yeah. Where you could
I'll
write
find it.
in
I'll
its
send it
move
to
on
you.
it.
Yeah, you could. Well, it was a contest. You had to guess what it. You had to like decipher it.
That's right. That's right. That was I would argue, or I would almost suggest just going back and watching like the original Pokemon TV show was always pretty
It's
great.
on Netflix.
But um yeah, but I think they end it like in a spot where it clearly wasn't supposed to end, but like earlier, if I recall. But neither here nor there. Um, Lots to unpack here, but I would really just say that if you have someone in mind to talk customization, I think we'd love to talk customization with somebody because there's certainly a big market for it. And, you go into any bricks and minifigures and you see the brick arms, weapons and stuff, and they do a great job of capturing not only weapons from like Star Wars, but then they do kind of their own series of medieval weapons, and kind of for anyone wanting to delve into kind of actual army building, right? Like there's everything from old muskets to kind of modern weaponry too. But those aren't the only examples. We've seen other examples of minifigure accessories and stuff. So clearly there is a industry out there for this. So
well, and we actually picked two really good brick mails for this topic today because the next brick mail is going to have another question kind of on the opposite end of the customization conversation. And we didn't even get into that. Like, this is just the number of Lego sets. Lego adjacent stuff has also really blown up, right? As well.
Right.
Like, there's a lot bigger Lego community, and therefore there is more people doing stuff like customization, right? I almost felt bad removing promo items, but I really wanted to just have the retail sets available, because another thing is like, oh, well, I really want that gift with purchase. So now I got to go buy a Lego set, right? And it's got to be $200. So that's why I've talked about it before, but I keep just a running wish list so that I'm always ready to, like, there's always something I can buy from Lego, and I could drain that wish list tomorrow if I really wanted to, but I know there's going to be a gift with purchase that I want.
I really want that $10 Lego set, so I'm going to spend $200 to get it.
Exactly. But there is a whole customization side. So like if you start to collect customization, like again, the competitiveness, the attention that you're fighting with is not just Lego sets, right? It's well, I want this Wicked Brick stand. I want this Clone Army custom. I want Light My Brick, right? Like there's a lot of stuff out there that's also Lego-ish, right?
Yeah, absolutely. How much train stuff exists in that space, right?
All of it, pretty
much.
And
we've mentioned, I think this is an area that Lego could get into if they wanted to. In our podcast episode where we sort of had kind of a critique of Lego, we mentioned that this kind of customization area or sort of adult niche themes are things that Lego could do. And I think we mentioned this even in the adult episode, the kind of rated R Lego episode of like, could Lego come up with like a sub company that does all of the stuff that the Lego company doesn't want to do, but keep it, separate company, separate name, same production line or something like that, right? Like
Lego, if you have an M&A team, we're right here. Dude. Just come and get us.
Yeah. Oh man. But anyways, thank you for the letter, and we're very excited for Pokemon 2. And I think, to your point, right? Like it's kind of to each their own to some extent. And as long as you're engaging in the hobby in a meaningful way, then I think that's wonderful. So thank you for writing in.
Our next brick mail is from Mr. Follow. They write, "Hey bricks, clicks, and big figs." Whoa. Like, well, I'm just kidding. Good job. First time commenter here. I binged the entire back catalog over the last few weeks. Dang, that is impressive. Desperately happy to discover my new favorite podcast. Well, that's a big sentiment that we do not take lightly. So thank you. Love your brotherly banter, perspectives on curation, focus on data, and genuine enthusiasm for the ABS bricks. So many other influencers sound so permanently angry with Lego, in quotes, Lego these days, despite living through what I consider to be the golden age for AFOLs. Love your balanced perspective on value, as well as trying to understand Lego's decision making from a business perspective. My fave themes and sub themes skew reasonably close to some of yours, and while I first started as a Lego Star Wars collector, my New Year's resolution was to expand outside of the Lucasverse. I've since decided to downsize my Star Wars sets and just keep the mini scale starships, dioramas, and helmet collection. This has given me the display space and budget to enjoy pushing further into other themes with Creator 3-in-1, Icons, and Jago City, and also a bit of Dreams, as my son is 6 years old and loves the show. The color schemes are absolutely wild and push my naturalist color preferences in new directions, and I love how they really encourage kids to rebuild their creations with most of their sets. They're the new 20-in-1 mini vehicles are especially good gifts for kids, I think, as a sign of how far my theme exploration has gone. I've even placed Andrea's Modern Mansion on my wish list. I think Lego needs to send us a copy of that for the
I know
amount of
how many
attention
times
we've
we've
given
sold.
that set. Question for you, Grinch. I've enjoyed the episode on curation as well as how you've had decided some time ago to focus on set collecting versus mock building. How did you come to that decision? I find myself trapped between those two worlds and building up a big backlog while working on a large mock project for a few months at a time, feeling ever more guilty. I should probably pick a lane or stop buying sets during lengthy mock builds, but I still generally love many of the themes and sets I collect. How do I learn to stop worrying about and loving the backlog? P.S. I just saw the Samurai Castle tribute on Lego Ideas and instantly thought of you two and went to leave a comment. Looking forward to the ninja theme recap. Ah, me too. I will have to go check that out on Lego Ideas, the Samurai Castle tribute. So your question was, how did I decide to focus on mock building versus collection? And the key word there is how I decided, because it was, a personal decision based off of what I value. And I think you need to
call.
2015. There was a lot of coffee involved. No, it's a personal decision that like needs to come from you and what you value, right? So that's key. I decided to really focus more on set collecting and curating because I really enjoyed building Lego, and I was doing some mock building, and I realized I was spending just as much money on the mock building as I was on the set collecting, and I wanted more sets, but I didn't want to spend more on Lego. So I was like, okay, I should probably pick a lane here. And I ended up picking the collection part and building because I was going to do that like if I was going to do one regardless, it was going to be that. And the mock building, like I've recently done some mocks. They're just not like large scale, like super mocks, right? It's not a full city layout. It's just like, here's a random project that I worked on this year. Here's another random project I'm working on. That's not giant things. And I can let the mock part sit for a couple months and I can come back to it. Whereas the sets I wanted to keep building. So I knew I wanted to focus on that. And, ultimately I'm very dedicated to my career outside of Lego, as well as like Lego as a hobby. I enjoy that, but like I'm first and foremost, I'm dedicated to my career and my family. And so the part of the collecting and building was more of the weekend getaway or the nighttime getaway than like I'm trying to build and present and create a giant mock. So for me, like what kind of aligned with my personal values was more of just having the hobby versus having like the art form of building mock. So that's kind of my short, long answer.
No, I mean, this was your experience, Grinch, so I don't want to comment like on something that wasn't.
Wow, you're just projecting on me.
Experience, but I thought this was really wise of you to come to that realization. And as someone who has kind of still tried to kind of keep a middle ground to some extent, although I'm not mock building at the moment, I suppose I'm purely collecting. That is a big decision to make to try to pursue a mock building as like a thing, because the amount of pieces you have to just buy in bulk is so tough. And I'm sure both you experience this, and I know I've experienced this, but you get a lot of stuff and you're like, oh, I've got this really great design for street lamps, for example, or, I'm going to put this type of bench throughout my city. And then a new design for a bench pops up and you're just like,
That one's better.
great.
I got to go do
That's the
that.
new bench I want to add. And so now I've got to redo my entire system. Or,
Yeah.
you see something that somebody does online, and, when you are doing, you had done a winter village. That was your
Mm-hmm.
kind of build. And you kind of mentioned at one point, you're like, I'm struggling with this theme because there's a real issue with scale and sort of the older winter village sets and the newer winter village sets. Ironically, they kind of seem to be going back to the older scale to
I
some extent.
love it.
But you had mentioned that, and you're like, I am just struggling like this. Some of these mid
I got to
theme
customize
sets,
everything now.
the fire department, it's so big. The one cottage set, that light blue cottage set, is huge compared to some of these other ones that are, in the series. It's just a lot. And you're like, when I'm building this town, I think you had ballasted all of your railway, track at one point, and you were like, the time I spent doing that was insane. And, like,
Yeah.
the number of white 4x4s that you had, 4x4 plates that you had, like, in just bags that were just sort of sitting there, like, which is not necessarily what Mr. Follow is suggesting, right? But, like, at the same time too, it's a slippery slope. And as someone
Well, and I think
yeah, go
that
ahead.
was a key part of my decision.
Yeah.
Is that, like, I literally spent like 8 hours just working on like sidewalks one day. And I like looked at it and I was like, I mean, it looks really good, but I've got like the Stranger Things set right here, and I didn't get to build that because I
Yeah.
did sidewalks. And what ultimately the decision was is building the Stranger Things set was more important to me than building the sidewalks.
Mm-hmm. Which, yeah, I mean, exactly, right? And it can be so much. As someone who's been trying to I have a city at some point, like, to go back to the term decision paralysis, you kind of get to a point where you're like, you have to sort of pick a direction and be okay with the way it goes. And one of the great things about Lego and the hobby as an AFOL, especially as like a mock builder, is seeing things online. It's also one of the worst things in the world is you see something and you're like, that's really cool, I want to do that. But like it can be so much to do, and building something to that scale and size is it's really tough, and it's really hard to incorporate. And we naturally as humans apply a lot of constraints. And so mock building is tough. It's really tough depending on the scale and size you want to get into. So not to say it's impossible, not to say there aren't some really great mock builders out there, but yeah.
Well, and you asked another question here too. It says, how do I learn to stop worrying and loving the backlog, like embrace the backlog? The other reason I didn't want to do mock building is because I move a lot, and it's a lot easier to just like build the set, get it set up, versus being like halfway through a mock project and trying to move all the time. But with the backlog, I think the important thing there, again, this is just personal, is the very definition of the backlog. Like, what is it? It's like, I'm going to build this set, but I'm not going to build it right now. So I'm just going to set it on the shelf and I'll get to it. If that's what you're doing with the backlog, then it's serving its purpose. If the purpose of a refrigerator is to store your food so it stays fresh longer so you can eat it later in the week, so you don't have to eat it right now.
Yeah.
You don't feel bad for putting celery in your fridge and letting it sit there for 5 days. Right? Don't feel bad for putting a Lego on a backlog and letting it sit there for 5 months and then getting to it.
Oh, now, shoot. I've had stuff in my backlog for years.
Yeah, me too. You might get to the point where it's like, well, now this thing's worth 3 times the price, so should I open it or should that's a different discussion. But I have also gotten to the point with like my backlog where like I collect all the Marvel sets, and like I will sometimes not even build like some of the 4+ Marvel sets because I've got so much to build, and I'm just getting the figures from it, and it's more expensive to get the figures secondhand on Bricklink new than it is to just buy the set on sale on Amazon. So I'll just open it, dump it into a bag, label it, and be like, here's this set in case I ever sell it, and grab my figures. But I mean, it's a 4+ set. I'm probably not going to enjoy that set very much. So So thank you for the question. I hope that helps.
A great
Um,
discussion.
yeah, great question. Keep writing in if you have questions. Wes, did you want to hit us with the last bit of brick mail before we
Yeah.
finish?
And so this is at this last little our last piece of brick mail this week comes from at VDC to me. And they say, I've heard you guys mention the digital versus building experience. I'm wondering if you guys have tried doing Lego in VR. Being a fan of Lego and enjoying spreading out my parts, building a set, and interacting with it is amazing. But I must say that the immersion and perspective that you get inside VR building is a lot of fun, and is uh, and it is not to replace kind of the regular building experience. I'm very disappointed that the Lego group has not taken a better steps in utilizing this immersive tool better. I would really like to be able to use Studio and put on my headset and get inside my build. And I would say that that would be amazing. I mean, to some extent, you know, being able to interact in that capacity, I think would clean up a lot of what Studio is if I
Mm-hmm.
could build it in virtual reality. Um, I think that would be really fun. I don't know.
I think they were trying to do this in the with the whole metaverse stuff.
Is it not it sounds like it's a thing. So is it a thing based
Yeah, I
off
don't.
of the
It sounds
person?
like you've done it before. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd be curious. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm like behind the technological times by any means, but like I'm very solidly a millennial here, and so VR
Your phone still flips, right?
flips. It's a Nokia.
Yeah, I'm a T9 champ. Should see how fast I can write in T9.
Yeah.
Man,
Don't know what emojis are. No.
God, half our audience probably doesn't know what T9 is.
That's true. Yeah. Gosh, missing out. The good old days. Anyways,
Does your cell phone still have a tin can, and a string on it?
virtual reality. I don't know. I think that those type of building experiences, I think that would be really fun, right? So if they had something, I've been building more in Studio myself recently to kind of scratch that mock itch a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, I was exploring. I built some small scale models just recently and have been exploring ways to maybe look at adjusting the boat on the Eldorado Fortress set a little bit myself. So I think there is something to be said about doing that, right? And I think there could be, with virtual reality, some really interesting, ways that you could involve like Stud.io, like, but that is kind of something Lego's done not only with augmented reality, right? We saw that with like the Hidden
Yeah.
Side series, which I think struggled a little bit. I think AR is a little tougher of a sell than something like VR. But isn't that kind of what's going on with Fortnite and like that Lego Worlds thing? Like,
It's
could
more
you?
that's more of like Minecraft Lego.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to sort of see some sort of middle ground between that and maybe what VDC to me is um, suggesting here, which could be like you could walk through like the downtown diner or something,
Yeah.
or
Well,
experience it from like a minifigures perspective, like a Lego set, which I
my
think would be
guess
kind
is
of
it's
interesting.
very expensive,
Yeah,
and so much so that in order to justify doing it, it couldn't be a secondary experience. Like if you went
that's a
and
fair
bought the
point.
set, like you buy the set, you build it, right? And they have the 3D instructions now that you can use on your iPad. Like that's you need instructions to build a set, so you could probably justify the additional cost. But in order to have like a VR experience then with the set where you could like go to the downtown diner or whatever, my suspicion is you'd probably in whatever VR verse universe, you would have to buy that set in there,
Mm-hmm.
like a DLC. Just because I mean there's a lot more that goes into then you're going down to the absolute detail with that set on a different scale than is already being created, right? Because you've got to be Lego form or
Yeah,
size to be able to do that, right? So that would be my guess, but it'd be cool. Maybe it'd be a good like you and I did that VR experience at Mall of America. I
mm-hmm.
think it was called the Void.
Yeah,
Be cool experience to do it something like that, right? But we just talked about how they have literally 600 sets a year. Do they only do it for 1 or 2 sets? You know,
Yeah.
if they do something like where do they draw the line? Maybe it's more, but then inevitably people are going to be disappointed because it'd probably be something like Star Wars, like go tour the Millennium Falcon, right? It'd probably maybe Avengers Tower. And so we inherently went to Downtown Diner because we're Lego nerds. But I think, you know, if you're sitting in a corporate boardroom, you'd be like, well, what set would we do? It'd probably be a Star Wars set, right?
Potentially. Definitely one of the better sellers. So it's an interesting question. I think inherently though, Lego is a physical medium. So I think anything that gets beyond that starts to get away from sort of the core principle of Lego building to some extent. But
Mm-hmm.
I think it could still be very additive to the experience too. Right. Like,
Right.
and I would, well, maybe more of a discussion on the utility of virtual reality and augmented reality in the long run, right? But I think that is maybe the shortcoming of all of those programs. As someone who's used virtual reality for things like, you know, kind of high-end simulations, I think it does make sense for certain, you know, careers and uses, right? So maybe there's a way that this is done. You know, you could almost see like from Iron Man where he's like assembling the suit in like a holographic way. Like maybe that's the way like Lego designers in 2040 are like building and designing a set, you know, but
Yeah.
who knows? So
If you think price per part is bad now, folks, just get ready.
think of how many Dogecoin per pieces per piece that's going to cost, you know.
0.
Fair.
And that is a wrap of another episode of AFOLs Welcome. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you are listening to this show. If you would like to write the podcast, please email us at afolswelcome@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at AFOLsWelcome. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you on the next one.